Rick and Morty continued its sixth season with a really out there sci-fi concept, and they leaned into it hard. The second episode of the season, titled Rick, a Mort Well Lived, built a really fun new simulation concept out of the already established Roy, a Life Well Lived video game, first seen in season 2. And the concept on paper, to me, is reminiscent of stuff we saw in the first couple of seasons, at least conceptually. But I think the thing that people seem to be overlooking about this episode is that through this simulation story, we actually also get a really unique and in-depth character deconstruction of Morty himself, as well as a fascinating analysis of Rick and Morty's relationship at this point in the show. And based on that little twist in the ending, it raises big questions about Morty as a character moving forward. So let's break down the implications of Rick, a Mort Well Lived. Rick and Morty are no strangers to dragons, you remember, which is my flimsy transition into today's video sponsor, Dragon City. Dragon City is a free-to-play game where you can build a dragon empire by collecting over 1,000 unique dragons. I've always loved monster raising / collecting games, and Dragon City has so many cool features. You can breed 2 dragons to get new ones, hatch them, feed them to evolve, and then of course train them, go into battle in different PvP modes, and take on other dragon masters. They're even doing a collaboration with The Walking Dead. Celebrate the show's return with new Negan, Maggie, Rick, Carol, Daryl, and Michonne dragons. Each dragon has a primary element and special bunker attack to harness extra power in PvPs. If you're into villains, The Walking Dead Negan dragon is already available. He may have a primary element of happy, but his enemies won't be happy when he uses his baseball bat. You can get Negan, Maggie, Rick, and Carol dragons through offers or breeding as they arrive in game, and if you master the Michonne quest, you'll get that Michonne dragon too. To collect all the exclusive The Walking Dead dragons, download Dragon City by clicking the link in the description or scan this QR code, and get a special free starter pack with 15,000 food, 30,000 gold, and the epic zombie nature dragon. And I mean, come on, look how great this design is. Check out Dragon City today. While this episode was sort of advertised as a Die Hard parody, that ultimately ended up being the B-plot. I think what I appreciated most about Summer's Blips and Shits Die Hard experience was how the show just continues to develop Summer into more of a confident badass. She's continuing to rise to the occasion in pretty dire situations, and I think that has really interesting potential moving forward, especially as the family continues to sort of develop into their own more confident ragtag group of interdimensional misfits. But the main plot all takes place within Roy, a Life Well Lived, where Morty's consciousness has been divided into essentially every single character on Earth in the Roy video game, except for Roy himself. This means Rick, as Roy, has to convince every person on the planet that they're actually Morty, so that they can escape the game with Morty's personality intact. Like I said, this simulation concept reminds me of old school Rick and Morty ideas like autoerotic assimilation, M. Night Shyamalan's Anatomy Park, or The Ricks Must Be Crazy. Not saying it quite lived up to those episodes, but it had an old school Rick and Morty feel conceptually. But as I mentioned up top, what makes the episode shine to me is how it pretty literally deconstructs Morty as a character and explores his relationship with Rick. With Morty divided amongst 8 billion people, these people are basically all capable of representing very specific aspects of Morty's personality. And by showcasing these parts of Morty without the first-hand knowledge of who Morty actually is or what his relationship with Rick is like, they actually have to piece things together and make up their own mind about their real-life self through their in-game relationship and interactions with Rick. What I love about this is that it basically removes all of the baggage that weighs on Morty in his existing relationship with Rick and allows parts of him to look at that relationship from a bit more of an objective point of view, at least from the relationship standpoint. They also don't have the first-hand knowledge or experience of what Morty's life is actually like with Rick. They're only viewing it through the relationship as seen in-game. But it is still such a fascinating way to really break down and explore the character. And most interestingly, they do it through this in-game character, Marta, who seems to represent a very substantial part of Morty's personality, a very charismatic, capable, and defiant part of his personality, a part that was able to rally nearly the entire population of Morty people and lead them towards the bigger cause, to wake up in the real world as Morty. And I think this part of Morty's personality is pretty important. We've seen Morty become a bit more defiant as the show has gone on. The season 4 premiere, Edge of Tomorty, Rick Die Rick Pete, showcased this very thoroughly as Morty entirely defied Rick for his own personal gain. And the way Marta is such an effective leader is also reminiscent of episodes like Close Recounters of the Rick Kind, which showcased Morty's natural ability to inspire and lead.
He's the one true Morty!
He led an entire uprising back in season 1, even before he started to gain more confidence through his experience consistently adventuring with Rick. But the episode also raises really interesting questions about these little bits of Morty that are now an entire world population. Why would these people want to become Morty again? We see firsthand that not all of these pieces of Morty are the same, and they've also lived entire lives and had experiences entirely their own. What exactly is the draw of merging to become one unified person, completely losing all of the individuality they've garnered over these simulated lives? Do these simulated lives not actually matter because they're simulated, even though they've had actual experiences that have informed their growth and development? Especially when the only thing that these people really know about Morty's life outside of Roy from a first-hand perspective is that he's got a close relationship with Rick, who within the game treats the majority of these pieces of Morty like garbage.
We're divided because some of us don't trust the guy. What happens to that part of us when we're all back together? One Morty indivisible under a cranky old bag of dicks?
And I think this is a really interesting way to portray Morty's internal struggle with his relationship with Rick. We saw at the end of last season how important that relationship is to him. After Rick left with 2 crows, Morty continually tried to reforge that connection. But based on the way Rick treats Morty, there's got to be a part of him that harbors some resentment. Something we also saw him entertain briefly when talking to Evil Morty in the season 5 finale, who is obviously someone that represents that Rick resentment to the absolute extreme. And that resentment is going to grow in these parts of Morty's personality that are seeing Rick actively call him unimportant. Rick doesn't seem to care if Morty is missing parts of his personality when he remerges, and even claims it won't make a difference.
Oh no, let me crunch these numbers. 8% of 5 billion plus 1 person. My God, if you stay, it changes nothing.
And basically the message this is conveying is that Rick doesn't actually care about or value certain parts of Morty. He values certain aspects of him much more and completely undervalues other parts. But Morty is a culmination of all of these things. This is supposed to be the closest relationship Morty has, and the person on the other end is actively saying he doesn't actually love or respect him as a whole. That's pretty heavy.
The only reason any of us matter is we're pieces of Morty. You taught us that, Rick, but you also taught us you don't care about Morty.
And it also begs the question, what exactly is it that prevents Rick from loving all of Morty? It's clear how important their relationship is to him as well. He's going to great lengths to get him out of the game. And while it could have to do with how Rick feels about Morty, I think it also has a bit more to do with Rick's past and trauma. This Rick lost his Diane and Beth violently, the people he loved most in the world. And we've seen time and time again how that affects his ability to forge meaningful connections. Season 4's The Old Man in the Seat explored in depth how Rick's ability to forge connection is just completely broken. He effectively was only capable of connecting to Tony through an antagonistic relationship. And while it seemed like he hated him, it became clear at the end of the episode how much that antagonistic relationship actually meant to Rick. It's the only way he's able to connect with people. Rick losing the only people he ever loved so horrifically prevents him from admitting that he loves his grandson, from admitting how important that connection actually is to him. Because if he admits it, and then he loses Morty, he'll have to suffer the same heartbreak. But I think that this Marta part of Morty, the part that is a strong leader with a real capacity for defiance, is pretty massively important, because it seems to be the part of Morty that makes him capable of actually going toe-to-toe with Rick. When Marta decides that without the 8% of Morty people that are holding out, she doesn't want to leave the game either, she basically turns a massive chunk of the population against Rick. Obviously, we've seen variants like Evil Morty capable of going toe-to-toe with Rick, and a few examples of Morty really holding his own in defiance of Rick, but this isolated aspect of Morty's personality really proves how much potential Morty has. He leads an entire army and basically half of the world in defiance of Rick. And in this sort of strategic chess match between the two, Rick effectively lost to this part of Morty's personality. It wasn't until Marta had a change of heart that she decided to have the population go through with exiting the Roy game and merging back into Morty. And that's just so fascinating to me. We've seen hints of Morty's potential before, but this is sort of flat out confirmation of the kinds of things he's capable of, the accomplishments he might be able to achieve if he hones in on these specific aspects of his personality, or at least he could have been capable of. Because the end of the episode raises a lot of questions. Marta eventually changes her mind and decides to help Rick re-merge the population back into Morty, but she also seems to have embraced the person that she is and became over her life in Roy.
Call me Marta. That's my video game name. Speaking of which, I do have one condition.
This aspect of Morty's personality has basically opted to maintain her individuality, shedding the name Morty and maintaining her in-game name. And she doesn't actually go with the rest of Morty in the re-merging. She's the only one who stays behind. Rick even gets Blips and Chits to keep the game running perpetually so that Marta can live out her life. And as the screen flashes, you can see her still in there. Earlier in the episode, Rick claimed that losing this small part of his personality wouldn't actually matter, that it wouldn't make a difference in how Morty came out of the game. But that doesn't seem to be the case.
Almost 2 on the nose, right, Morty? Sure. I mean, whatever you say, Rick. You know best. I trust you implicitly.
And honestly, this ending is a huge bummer. A massively important aspect of Morty's personality is now trapped in this video game, and I'm super curious what this means for the character moving forward. Was this primarily for an emotional ending beat, or is this going to have lasting effects on Morty's personality and his relationship with Rick moving forward? Does this part of his personality that he's lost mean the kind of traits Marta portrayed cannot be further developed or fostered within Morty? Is it just a setback, or is it actually a fundamental change? Was this done on the writer's part to sort of regress Morty back into a classic Rick and Morty dynamic, where he isn't as confident or defiant, and instead is sort of dragged along on adventures against his will? But the big question is, will Morty ever be the same? Is a lot of the potential we saw through Marta now void? I don't think they would completely undo these possibilities for Morty, especially with the revelation that his biological grandfather is Rick Prime, Rickest Rick and Mortiest Morty and all that. Morty's potential seems to be a hugely important part of the character. So if I were to guess, I'd say this might be a tad bit of a setback or regression, but not something that can't be undone. It's hard to imagine them eliminating the development we've seen from Morty over 5 seasons of television, but it's also hard to say. And I hope that this experience is also something that sort of changes Rick. There was a moment near the end where he seemed to have reflected and was going to apologize before Marta cut him off, and that's pretty big for a character like Rick. So yeah, I had a lot to say about this episode, but none of it was about the humor or the Die Hard parody or even all that much about the great sci-fi premise. I think this is just a fucking great dissection of Rick and Morty as characters, and from such a unique and interesting angle. It's rare that a show can do such a literal deconstruction like this, and I find it really enjoyable to sink my teeth into. Overall, I thought the episode was solid, not top tier or anything. I think I probably could have laughed more, and the Die Hard parody had some fun moments but didn't do all that much for me. But when the A-plot gets me thinking about character and relationship dynamics like this, that goes a really long way for me. And the potential implications for the future of Morty's character are something that have me really intrigued, so I'm eager to see what's coming up this season. Sorry if this was less of a complete episode breakdown and mostly me unpacking the dynamics at play between Rick and Morty, but that's just what interested me about this episode. There are going to be other great breakdowns about this episode as well. Definitely make sure to check out the Roundtable. They always rock their episode breakdowns. And of course, Whitney over at New Rockstars is going to catch every goddamn missable detail you can imagine, so make sure to watch that video when it drops too. I love those dudes. But definitely let me know what you thought about the new episode below in the comments. And a huge thanks again to Dragon City for sponsoring this video. Remember, click the link in the description below or scan the QR code here to download Dragon City today. See y'all next week for episode 3. Peace.
Johnny! To challenge!